incredible. And I don't know who those devotees were. I think somebody told me they were traveling from the UK and stopped at Gita Nagari as one of the historic places in ISKCON in the US. But yeah, they really gave fantastic classes. So yes, I feel like I'm just following on their coattails and will try to speak something. And this verse, the second half of the purport, Prabhupada is speaking about Lord Shiva and how Lord Shiva is above the ordinary human beings, but even Lord Shiva cannot understand Krishna. And then Prabhupada goes on to explain a little bit about Shiva Tattva, which, as we know, and I think it's in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that it's explained, like Shiva Tattva is difficult to understand, probably in the Bhagavatam too, as well as Guru Tattva. So I'm not going to go so much into that. The only thing that I really know to say about Shiva Tattva is the example that Prabhupada commonly gives, that Lord Shiva, just as yogurt is non-different from milk, but it's also different from milk. That's like Lord Shiva is he's not, it's saying here, he's not in the category of Lord Vishnu, but he's also not he's not a common living entity. So it's pretty amazing and somewhat impressive, the amount of delusion that it would take for us here in the material world in Kali Yuga to think that we can understand Krishna, or a scholar or a scientist could understand Krishna just by their brains or any instruments they could make with their brains or any amount of AI or anything. If even Lord Shiva, who's really he's like yogurt compared to milk, which is pretty close. There's just the learn from Nagari, there's just the bacteria and some heat added, and that's all it takes to transform that milk into yogurt. So it doesn't take, there's not much of a difference there. In one sense, one could say between Lord Vishnu and Lord Shiva. But still, even Lord Shiva can't understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So as we're hearing from this Brahma Samhita verse, and also as we hear from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the Nectar of Devotion, from Rupa Goswami, that one can't just understand Krishna by their blunt material senses. One's eyes have to be anointed with the salve of love, which is pretty incredible. If you want to think about it from a scientific point of view, then you have to have the right instrument, which is the eyes tinged with the salve of love, to be able to understand Krishna. So, we don't have to even think about it in a sentimental way, because bhakti is the perfect combination of the head and the heart. But even if we do take it in a purely scientific way, then that's the instrument that we have to have. So if we don't have that instrument, just like if you don't have a microscope, you're not going to be able to see, the mitochondria or the bacteria or anything like that. And somebody would say you're crazy if you think you're going to go in and study bacteria just with your naked eye. And so in the same way, well, you're crazy if you think you're going to be able to study Krishna, so to speak, without having the eyes that are tinged with the salve of love, or anointed with the salve of love. So, and how many years, not just one scientist, but probably generations of scientists has it taken to even get a microscope that can keep getting perfected more and more to be able to see things with a greater magnitude, magnification power. So imagine, just for us, an individual is trying to, in one lifetime, develop those eyes anointed with the salve of love. Whereas even to see something material, it takes teams of scientists, decades, and generations to be able to develop an instrument that's capable of seeing something, or a telescope that's capable of seeing something millions of miles away, billions, maybe even trillions of miles away. And even that is not in color a lot of the time. Like I learned in high school, we got these, I forget what it was. Maybe we had some kind of assembly or field trip or something, and we got these NASA Hubble telescope, like a calendar or like a flip book, basically, with all the pictures of the nebula and stars and this and that the Hubble telescope had supposedly taken pictures of. And then I found out later, like years later, because I thought it was so cool. I love studying astronomy. And then I found out years later that those pictures weren't taken in color. They just like speculate on what colors go like, or they just color it themselves basically afterwards, just based on like, some speculation. Probably they would say some scientific evidence, but it's kind of a mix of like speculation, a little bit of what looks cool, and also some science. So yeah, so even telescopes that they've taken like decades, we still can't even see things in color. And going back to the point that we're trying to develop in one lifetime the tool, the instrument to be able to see Krishna. So it's not always easy, but it is always worth it. Like I often have heard that quote that even one's worst day in bhakti is better than one's best day in material life. So even if it gets tough sometimes, or there's some surprises or drawbacks or whatever it might be, it's still definitely far outweighs what one would experience even on their best day in material life. So going back to actually the last line of the translation today is that Lord Shiva is speaking, and he's saying, although we are part of the Supreme Lord, we consider ourselves independent, separate controllers, and thus we cannot understand his identity. So Lord Shiva here is laying out pretty much we just talked about the qualification that one's eyes have to be anointed with the salve of love. And then Lord Shiva is speaking about the disqualification, that if we consider ourselves independent, separate controllers, we cannot understand his identity. So essentially, this was making me think a lot about how Prabhupada would speak about the bodily concept of life. And perhaps, especially if you've been practicing bhakti a long time, or maybe even if you're a newer devotee, you've heard a lot bodily concept of life, bodily conception of life over and over again, so much that it can even become just like in our minds, perhaps just like a slogan, or yeah, we don't really think too deeply about it. But Prabhupada would emphasize this point and repeat it over and over again. And why is that? Well, if anybody here has ever taught or is a teacher, just like I think I saw Kala Swarup come in. So I know he was teaching for a while. So if you have to repeat something over and over again, what does it mean? It probably means that your students are not grasping it. Or yeah, you just have to go back to basics. Just like there's sports coaches. They say, like I played soccer for years, and so they'd basically have you go back to the same things, like drills and things that seem so it just seemed tedious. Why do we have to do this again? We're more advanced than that. We're higher than that. But no, these concepts and these drills have to be repeated again and again because we just don't get it. And especially if we've had this concept for, I mean, uncountable millions of lifetimes, then we need to hear it over. I mean, daily, we need to hear it. Especially me, I'm like every minute, I need to hear it. So this is the disqualification, is that if we are in the bodily concept of life and consider ourselves independent separate controllers, then we cannot understand his identity. So I was hearing a lecture by His Holiness Devamarita Swami where he was explaining this point, and I'd heard him explain it before, but this time it really hit that if we're identifying with something that we're not, which is this body and this mind, then we will experience anxiety and depression. Like no wonder this world is so fraught with so many mental disorders. I mean, physical disorders, mental disorders that result in physical disorders. So yeah, so many things. And we can see it even if we just look at the past 100 years or couple hundred years or even past 50 years in modern society, that with the degradation or dissolving of like religiosity and basically people identifying with something, some greater purpose or something higher that had to do with the supreme person, and knowing that, essentially having some understanding, like even in Christianity, that Jesus was preaching, we're not this body. And then I don't know so much about Islam and Judaism, but I'm assuming that they also speak about this point in different ways. So with the degradation of that being common knowledge, people aren't hearing this as much. People aren't going to church as much. People or temple or mosque are practicing a religion that speaks about these points, and we just become forgetful. We can see probably somebody could do a side-by-side comparison of the proportionate increase in these like mental disorders also. I'm not going to get into like all the details of it. And I'm definitely not vouching that, well, we just tell any devotee with like a mental disorder, oh, you just need to chant Hare Krishna and understand that you're not this body. But my point is that as a mass culture, if we're identifying with the body and something that we're not, then we will experience as a society this like purposelessness, more crime because people are just out for their own senses, more exploitation, and therefore more anxiety, depression, all kinds of things. And so similarly, if we make our own meaning in life outside of service to Krishna, or try to concoct something, then we'll also experience these things rampant within society. I was thinking like kind of an example that, whenever you're feeling like that feeling of when you try to convince yourself of something, even though deep down, it's different. So yeah, I don't know. There's so many examples like I don't even know, like you try to convince yourself. I think people probably have the common experience of like they did something wrong and they try to talk them. They're like, no, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. But deep down, they know that they like messed up or made a mistake, or they're in a relationship and they know, oh, you know, yeah, it's the right person, but it's actually like an abusive relationship. And deep down, they know it's not good for them. Or yeah, they're doing something and they know it's not good for them deep down. Well, in the same way, it's like we're trying to basically convince ourselves of a purpose to this life outside of service to Krishna, or as a society, everybody, it's commonly preached nowadays, make your own meaning to life. And there's like something in you, which is the soul, and the super soul can't fully get into it. So you're in an unnatural position, and like somewhere deep down inside of you knows this isn't the right thing. I keep telling myself I'm making my own meaning, and this is the point to my life, is to do this humanitarian work, or just to please my senses, or to dedicate myself to my family, or fixing up my body to look really nice or big and strong, or getting that car, getting a promotion, whatever it is, devoid of Krishna. Then deep down something, it creates anxiety because it's off. It's not the right conception. And then somewhere deep, even deeper than the mind, knows that that's not actually the purpose behind this world. And I'm sure a lot of devotees have had that experience, perhaps before coming to Krishna consciousness. Maybe we were even lucky enough that helped to bring us to Krishna consciousness, that we just couldn't fully get into material life. Or we were trying to get into material life, but we just felt like something is missing. As they say, the K-shaped hole in the heart. I know I definitely felt that way, that like, externally my life was very perfect, and I, good family, good, like my school was all paid for, and just like everything I could do what I wanted. But there was just like such a crippling sense of that like existential anxiety that only Krishna could fill. And so then whenever, a devotee presented me with this knowledge, and of course by their love and care, like to help me to actually get into it, then it just clicked. It's like the K clicked into place in the heart. And then I'm like, oh my gosh. I remember moments reading the Bhagavad Gita that I had to close it because abruptly, like basically slam it closed, because it was just so, I'm like, this can't be real. How much it's just clicking. So, yes, some maybe we're lucky to have that experience, or we're just got so burnt out from trying to make our own meaning that that then whenever we did come in contact with devotees or prasadam, kirtan, books, or some other way, then yeah, things, our hearts were open from all that material exhaustion. Our hearts were just open to being able to receive the real purpose of life, which is hearing about Krishna, chanting about him, and doing service to Krishna. So yeah, I know last time I spoke about reading Prabhupada's books, but I'm going to talk about it again. This purport, again, Lord Shiva is saying that, we can't understand Krishna, but we should at least, well, sorry, this purport's not saying it, but it reminded me of how, I forget I think I was listening to a Prabhupada lecture, but I can't remember that lecture. So anyway, I remember hearing the point that we can't understand Krishna, but we should try to understand Krishna by an authorized process. Like we can't fully understand him, but we should try by the authorized process, which is again hearing and chant. Well, there's the 9 different processes of devotional service, but the foremost being hearing and chanting about Krishna. And then one of the main functions, or one of the main parts of that hearing and chanting, is reading Srila Prabhupada's books. And we're very lucky here in Atlanta to Shivaram Swami made, well, what felt like a surprise visit, and he hasn't been here since 1975. And so he gave the Sunday feast class 2 days ago. And it was so good. And I got to get his association after, because he was out signing books. So I was just kind of like loitering and just waiting. I really wanted to thank him for something, this series of lectures that he put out, but I was feeling nervous. So I was basically just loitering around hearing him talk to all these people and associating with his godbrothers. And so I got so much out of that, just hearing people's, sort of informal darshans, I guess, or just asking him questions. And so he was, because he was selling his books there, he had a book stand, or one of his disciples was selling the books. He would ask everybody that bought his books and then went up to get him to sign them. He was saying, are you studying Srila Prabhupada's books? Like, where are you? Have you read the whole Bhagavatam? Because he was saying, his books are secondary. They're like, I think he said supplementary reading. And he was just really, every single devotee, like, you need to read Srila Prabhupada's books. And then one devotee, he was explaining to them that, how many books have we read just in this life? Like, we don't have time to read Srila Prabhupada's books, because think about, even for your education, that and he's speaking to a lot of like very successful people from Bharat. And so he didn't even know them personally, I don't think, but he just knows how to preach and really also speak to the heart. That how many books did you have to read just to get your degree, or just to study at the university, or before that? Probably, hundreds, if not thousands of books. And so what's reading, he said, these 4 books, which is Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Nectar of Devotion, and Bhagavad Gita. And he said, okay, granted, it's not just Srimad Bhagavatam's not just one book, it's 18 volumes, but still, he's speaking to doctors and engineers and all kinds of people. And he said, not even in this life, how many books have you had to read? And he said, and what was all that knowledge even for? He's like, you know what it was all for? Is this to learn how to feed yourself? He said it was so much love, but it was such a good point, that he's just like all those books you read were just teaching you how to feed yourself. And then it really put it into perspective for me. I was like, wow, yeah, this human form of life like is so we just have to work so hard just to, like Prabhupada says, work so hard just to do what the animals do without any anxiety. I mean, I see, like I said, I see the squirrels all the time, the bugs, there's all kinds of like huge bugs in Atlanta because it's warmer here. And they're not an anxiety about feeding themselves. Maybe even whenever winter comes, it doesn't snow here, but like they've got it covered. Those squirrels will make it. They buried, the nuts that they found. They don't have to work. They don't have to, go out and buy a suit. They don't have to impress their boss. They don't have to apply for jobs. Nothing like that. They just do it without any anxiety. And so Shivaram Maharaj was making the point that, we had to go through all that endeavor of reading all these books just to learn how to feed ourselves. So what's reading these four books, Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Nectar of Devotion, and Bhagavad Gita, to actually go for the ultimate goal of life, which is to go back home, back to Godhead. And he said, if you read Bhagavatam every day, Srila Prabhupada said, you'll be safe in spiritual life. And so then he was saying, how many books have we read in our previous lives, and where has it gotten us? It got us another material body. So yeah, he was speaking, and I'm kind of now combining things between what he said and those sort of the question slash public darshan sessions, and also what he said in his lecture, because the lecture was about the mercy of Lord Nityananda. And he was saying that the best way to internalize what we're reading and really make it stick is to preach and share that knowledge with others. So we can also do that amongst devotees. Like that's why doing the service of giving Srimad Bhagavatam class, I find it to be very nice. And Prabhupada, I believe, also was saying that, it helps things to stick and to really, again, internalize the actually, oh no, I thought I had a quote about it. I did look up, if you go on Vanny quotes and you look up understand Krishna as the two keywords, there's so many quotes Prabhupada's explaining in different letters, like, yeah, how to basically study the knowledge of Krishna consciousness, which Shivaram Maharaj was also emphasizing. That Prabhupada said you have to study it, just like an engineering book you study. You don't just like flip through it and just for like passive reading, but you really scrutinizingly study it. Then in the same way, if we study and then we repeat that knowledge and share it, and gradually our own style develops in preaching that, then it really helps the knowledge to become internalized and to stick. So I'm just going to go back one more time to the purport. That is actually all I had. So I'm just going to read the comment. Okay. So does anybody have any questions or comments or reflections? And then maybe we can take it from there and keep the discussion flowing.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for a very nice class. I'm thinking about retention of what we have read, and my own experience, like yourself, has been that by repeating, particularly preaching, giving classes, or otherwise preaching what we have read absolutely helps tremendously to reinforce the understanding of what we've read. And it should come as no surprise that um, the process of hearing and chanting is so very effective. It's what is recommended throughout Shastra and by all of our acharyas. Hearing and chanting is a very powerful process, um, and it's the best way to understand. Um, it's it's a wonderful thing because it's Sankirtan. It spreads the rays of the benediction moon, and it it enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we're always anxious, and it makes it possible for us to understand very deeply and thoroughly the subject matter, and it sticks. Um, it's the process of assimilation is somehow not complete until you actually share what you have heard with someone else.
Mm.
That process, the process of contemplating the subject matter to the extent that you can repeat it to someone else in a way that will make sense to them, trying to find the ways to get that message across is the process of thorough assimilation of the information. Anyway, that's been my experience that um, I never really understand anything that I have heard or read as well as I do when I get a chance to repeat it to someone and by Krishna's grace and mercy, the opportunities always come. If you hear something, you you enable yourself to become an instrument for Krishna, and then at some point or other, and often it's quite soon that you get an opportunity then to repeat something wonderful that you've heard, and it will just happen to be precisely what a particular individual needs to hear at that time. Um, it's all very wonderful the way that it works, but it's very joyful. But yeah, absolutely repeating and giving classes is one very wonderful way to do that. Otherwise, I don't know. My first experience, I guess, was just going out on Sankirtan every day and um, meeting people and speaking to them about Krishna consciousness and recalling whatever I had heard in that morning's Bhagavatam class or in other recent days or even weeks and months. Things would come back to me and I would find myself understanding things that I had not understood before. Somehow or other, in the process of repeating this or that, new understanding would come to me, um, greater understanding and much deeper understanding. Um, it's extraordinary. It's not there is a similar mundane process that one may undergo, but when that process is dovetailed with Krishna consciousness, it becomes especially wonderful, very extraordinary. It's mystical the way that it works, but it becomes wonderful for everyone, for you and for everyone around. And even those who are distant and can't possibly hear what you're saying, everyone benefits, even they benefit. The sound vibration purifies the ether everywhere. There is that statement that Srila Prabhupada made about sound vibration traveling around the world 8 times. I remember devotees used to meditate on that all the time. They took encouragement from the thought that by vibrating this sound vibration, it continues to travel, um, circling the earth 8 times. Um, so hearing and chanting, what a surprise. Hearing and chanting is the process. It's such a wonderful thing. It works so well, and there's nothing that compares. There's no superior process. It's the best thing. Just simply hearing and chanting Krishna Katha. It's um, within the scope of material nature. There is no panacea, but hearing and chanting Krishna Gita is actually a real, honest to goodness panacea. It solves every problem. It's a wonderful thing. Anyway, I want to thank you for reminding me of that. Um, my Bhagavatam class every day gives me things to contemplate and remember and think about throughout the day. Uh, Big injection of pure Krishna consciousness, always very nice. And always delightful to hear from you. Hare Krishna. Thank you again.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. I'm like taking notes on what you're saying now, getting the class within the class. Yes, thank you. It was just, I see Mother Rajalila's hand raised. I just wanted to read this one verse from Bhagavad Gita that Parka Prabhu was reminding me of, is 1868. For one who explains the supreme secret to the devotees, pure devotional service is guaranteed, and at the end he will come back to me. And then Prabhupada in the purport explains that generally it's advised that Bhagavad Gita is discussed amongst the devotees because those who aren't devotees won't understand Krishna or the Bhagavad Gita. But then as a purport to that purport is that, well, then we have to make devotees so that then we can, speak to them about Bhagavad Gita as well. So it doesn't exclude those who aren't practicing Krishna consciousness. Anyway, I just thought that it was a nice. Charaka Prabhu reminded me of that, and it was very nice for me to remember these verses. And then the next verse, Prabhupada says, Krishna is saying, "There is no servant in this world more dear to me than he, nor will there ever be one more dear." So it's a double whammy. We get benefited, and then also it's the most dear thing to Krishna that we continue speaking about him and enlivening one another. Mother Rajalila?
Harbo, Dinapalaka. It's always wonderful to see your smiley face and to feel your enthusiasm. I always feel it even over Zoom, no matter where you are. You're in Atlanta, you're in Gita, you're in, where is that, New Zealand? You have this enthusiastic mood that's internal. It's very sweet. Thank you. So I was thinking about Shivaram Swami and that beautiful story, and of him, encouraging people, to read Srila Prabhupada's books. And we can understand the purpose of anyone, whether it's Shivaram Swami or you, sharing about reading Srila Prabhupada's books is ultimately to help people to prepare to meet with Krishna, to prepare to have that ultimate relationship with the Lord. And so I was wondering, in reflecting about you having read Srila Prabhupada's books, how have you benefited in your life? You mentioned that, in your material life, you didn't have so many seemingly material challenges. However, here you are practicing Krishna consciousness. So, yeah, in your endeavor to meet with Krishna through reading Srila Prabhupada's books and distributing it, what is like one experience that you can share with us of how you have benefited?
Thank you for your question. The first thing that came to mind is just giving, because going back to the point of that this just living in the material world in general, but especially in Kali Yuga, and especially where we are in Kali Yuga, is that there's just so much to be disturbed by. I mean, it is the age of disturbance and anxiety and all kinds of things. And devotees, certainly, I mean, nobody's immune from that unless they're, on the pure devotional platform. But for me personally, Srila Prabhupada's books, like daily, or at least trying daily to hear and read, it just brings everything back into perspective. And it just really is like the constant reminder for me of what, of course, it's what is important, but I'm thinking it's like something related to that, but maybe I can articulate it in a different way. Yeah, perspective is just the word that's really coming to mind for me. And it's like taking a bath, honestly, every day, is that it's just like, oh, you're carrying all this like things that just accumulate, either from the previous day or that day. And then for me, whenever I read, it just, especially reading with devotees, it's just like you're dropping these like bags of dirt that you're carrying and just feel lighter and like, oh my gosh, yeah, this is so enlivening. We're going back to Godhead. Or I can just not take because for as enthusiastic and lighthearted and everything that I seem, I do take things very much to heart, and I take things very, sometimes too seriously, that I get bogged down. So reading Srila Prabhupada's books for me just brings the lightness back. Anyway, that's all I'll say about that.
So would it be fair to say, by you reading Srila Prabhupada's books and sharing Srila Prabhupada's books, you experience or you get minimized things like loneliness, like bewilderment, like frustration, like I don't know, some other depression, fear, all of those things become minimized? Is that pretty much what you're saying? Okay.
Definitely. And I think yeah, all of those things you mentioned are just really a result of seeing that the material world is going to give me something, basically going to give me some satisfaction, whether it's mental or physical or another person or this situation or that. And then you read Srila Prabhupada's books and he's like, remember, it's actually not going to do that for you. And then you can be happy again, because it's like, oh, right. It's not where I'm looking for it is not where I'm going to get it. So then, it's like somebody's doing you the greatest favor if they can tell you where to find real happiness. So yeah, thanks for making me, thanks for asking that question and having me think about that. It was nice to reflect on. Does anybody else have any other comments or questions, or if they'd like to share what they, even Mother Reggie, if you'd like to share, or anybody else would like to share what they feel like they get from reading Srila Prabhupada's books? I know sometimes devotees don't like to talk about themselves, but it would help. It would help everyone just to increase the enlivenment. It's like you're talking about a material life people do that too. It's like, oh, I got this perfume or whatever. Like I was just with my brother and he was gonna buy a really expensive cologne, like hundreds of dollars. And how does one want to have that? Is by hearing from other people that it's like, this is really good. It's gonna change your life. It's gonna make you so, irresistible or whatever. So similarly, if we discuss this about Srila Prabhupada's books, they're really good. They're really gonna change your life. This is what I've gotten from it. And we can all become more enlivened. So would anyone like to share?
I could share a little something about my most recent experiences. I'm just appreciating within myself how, after years of hearing, reading, that what initially seemed like an impossible task, trying to purify an incredibly contaminated mind full of so much nonsense, that actually there's been a tremendous amount of purification, and the um, the hearing has resulted in a displacement of mountains of nonsensical subject matter and concepts. They've all just been um, gradually, um, imperceptibly displaced by all kinds of Krishna Katha. But as that process was taking place, I couldn't really see what was happening. But now, in retrospect, after years, I can see that there's been an extraordinary transformation, and the nonsense in my mind that I used to struggle with is just um, it's practically gone now. There's just always so much Krishna consciousness. There's an example that devotees will sometimes cite, that you had, for example, some milk that is contaminated with ink, so that milk no longer appears white. It looks dark and cloudy because it's got ink in it. So one way to purify the milk is just to keep adding more milk, and eventually the milk displaces all of the ink, and you have just milk remaining. Um, so it's kind of like that we just keep adding more and more Krishna Katha, and eventually everything else is just flushed out. For myself, I have a limited capacity. My brain is, I don't know, it was probably small to begin with, but it's been abused, put through a lot of things, a lot of damage. Don't have a lot of brain cells left, and there's only so much information I can retain, but the more Krishna I put in, it means something else has to be erased in order to free up space to accommodate something new, and so gradually there's nothing left but Krishna Katha. And I find that I don't even have to necessarily understand the subject matter. Um, I first had this realization as a new devotee when um, the temple had a sound system. There was Srila Prabhupada's bhajans and lectures broadcast all throughout the entire temple. 5 floors of Srila Prabhupada, 24 hours a day. And um, my first service was cleaning. And I cleaned the entire temple from top to bottom. It was a big job. And I was on my own for many hours, just hearing Srila Prabhupada. And initially, I couldn't understand what he was saying because of his heavy accent. It took a while to, learn to understand what he was saying. But I was told to just hear the sound vibration anyway, even if I can't understand it, that just hearing the sound vibration is still purifying. And that was my experience, that it was incredibly relishable and purifying. But not only that, even though I couldn't understand what Srila Prabhupada was saying, just by hearing the sound vibration, I was able to understand the subject. Without being able to understand his words, I understood what he was saying, the message that he was communicating, just by hearing the sound vibration, because it's a transcendental thing. It has nothing to do with the material body, and it penetrates all the layers of material covering and reaches the soul. Um, and the way it appeared to me actually was that I was just remembering things that I actually already knew but had forgotten somehow, and it was just reviving my memory. But even though I couldn't understand the words that Srila Prabhupada was saying, and I find the same is true when I read. There was a time when I used to skip over the Sanskrit quite a bit, because I couldn't understand the Sanskrit and I struggled to pronounce it, and I would just read, what I could understand. Um, but now I've come to really, really love the Sanskrit. It's incredibly delicious. It's just extremely relishable to hear and to I may struggle a little bit at first to pronounce it. I'll repeat it a few times till it flows smoothly, but it's so nice. Um, I've made a practice of regularly, several times a day. There are all kinds of shlokas, different verses, and prayers that I like to recite. Sometimes with the English and sometimes just the Sanskrit. I recently started reciting Brahma Samhita. Just the right now, I'm just working on the Sanskrit, and my God, it's just so relishable. It's so nice and so powerful, and I immediately can perceive how it's displacing so much nonsense, and um, it's so purifying and uplifting, and I'm saved from so much implication and all kinds of karma because for the time I'm reciting that, I'm not doing anything else material. There's nothing mundane going on. I'm just chanting and hearing this transcendental sound vibration. It's purifying me and the atmosphere around me, and it's just wonderful. And it leaves me feeling powerfully encouraged to try to fill my entire day with Krishna Katha in that way, and just eliminate every last vestige of nonsense in my consciousness. It's just such a sweet experience. Anyway, um, you asked, so that's my realization. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. That was very enlivening to hear, and yeah, inspiring to try to do something of the same. I actually have to go because it is 8 o'clock, and I'm assuming that the doors are going to open. So devotees who are there are encouraged to go sing for Radha Damodar. Thank you all so much for this opportunity, and I hope to see you all soon. Hare Krishna, Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Have a fantastic day, devotees in Krishna's service.
Thank you so much for class.
Hare Bol.